Christmas has come. Well, it's not quite here yet, but I hope you've started planning for your Christmas services. In this video, we're talking about how to engage people who only come to church once or twice a year. You know, those people who only come on Christmas or Easter. We can ignore them or we can engage them. So you're going to learn how to do that today. Coming up. Hey, Spencer here from leadingworshipwell.com, your daily dose of practical worship leading tips. If you're looking to learn how to lead yourself well, lead your church well, and lead worship well, you're in the right spot. So thanks for joining me today. In this video, we're talking all about how to engage people who only come to church once or twice a year during Christmas and Easter. You know, there are those people. And so as we prepare for Christmas, I hope you've started to prepare for Christmas by now. We want to think about those people because those people will be at your Christmas services this year. They're going to be there, whether it's online or in person, and you can choose to do one of two things. You can choose to ignore them and act like they don't exist and be bitter towards them because they don't come to church regularly, or you can choose to engage them and actually acknowledge that they exist, whether you agree with what they do or not. You can acknowledge that they exist and you can engage them and choose to lead them in Christmas worship. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So if you're not interested in engaging those people, don't watch the rest of this video. But if you are, I'm going to teach you some ways that you can do that. Before we get into that, though, I want to hear from you. I want to know, how do you plan on engaging those people this Christmas? Do you have any things planned? Are you thinking about that already? Do you have something that you planned with the rest of your church staff? Or maybe you serve in a small church and it's just you and you're like, I hadn't even thought about that. That didn't even cross my mind. If that's you, let me know down in the comments below. Let me know, how do you plan on engaging people who only come to church once or twice a year? Talk to you in a second. Thanks for leaving your answer down below. Let's talk about this. How do you engage people who don't come to church regularly and only come on Christmas and Easter? The first thing that I want to encourage you to do is to, number one, not condemn these people, whether verbally or in your head. I don't think we're usually smashing people in the face whenever they only come to their Christmas Eve service, and we're not yelling at them, but I think it happens sort of quietly in our heads whenever we see them. And I want to encourage you to not condemn people. I want you to think about it this way: challenge people instead of condemning them. Challenge people who only come to church once a year instead of condemning them. Instead of saying, hey, I saw that person there, I haven't seen them since Christmas last year, why do they only come then? I want you to think, how can I challenge that person to take just a little bit step deeper in their faith? And think about that as you plan and set up those moments. So challenge people instead of condemning them. I want you to think, how can I encourage those people who don't come to church regularly to just sort of dip their toe into the uncomfortable? If they only come to church once a year, they're probably not comfortable with a lot of the things that you do. So you don't have to cater to that uncomfortability and strip down everything at your Christmas service. I don't believe that that's the right answer, but invite those people in. Let them know, hey, I know some of you might not be comfortable with this, but I want to encourage you to raise your hands during this next song. We're going to be worshiping God, and you can go through that whole talk about why we raise our hands in worship. If you want to do that, that's an idea. That's something that would be uncomfortable for somebody who doesn't regularly come to church and worship corporately. That'd probably be uncomfortable for them. But you can throw out these little opportunities where you're saying, hey, and you don't say this specifically, but you're saying, hey, I know you don't come to church regularly, but if you want something more out of tonight, this is what it looks like. If you just want I went to Christmas Eve service and felt good about myself experience, you'll probably get that if you're here. But if you want to go deeper, this is what it can look like for you. And you can't force people to go deeper, but you can offer the challenge to them. Or maybe it looks like this. Maybe you set up some time in between songs or maybe in between a chorus and a bridge, and you just lead people in praying for something specific. And maybe you pray for it first, and then you just give it to them and say, take these next 30 seconds to pray to God. And maybe for some of those people who don't come to church often, maybe they haven't just sat and prayed for more than 10 or 15 seconds before. I'm not saying everybody's like that, but that might be their story. And maybe they need that moment to realize that God is real, that God loves them, and maybe God wants to work in those moments. So don't condemn people. Don't say out loud. I don't think most of you would do that, but don't even think in your head, man, these people, they only come to church once a year. I don't need to lead them. No, challenge them. Encourage them to step up to the plate and participate in the rest of what the corporate gathering is doing. The second way to engage people who only come to church once or twice a year is, yes, we want to challenge them to step a little bit outside of their comfort zone, but we also want to give them something familiar that if they choose to participate, they can do so without very many barriers. And for me, Christmas is an amazing time for us to do that. That's what I think in my head, because everybody knows Christmas songs. So here's the point, include familiar songs in your set list. I know that there are some new Christmas worship songs, and I'm going to be doing some of those at my church. Sorry, there's a car outside that's really loud right now. It's like about to blow up or something. Okay. And it's gone. So include familiar songs. I was saying before, everybody knows Christmas songs, right? So we can use those. There's some amazing new worship songs that nobody knows that we need to teach our church, and that's okay to do some of that. I'm going to be doing some of those at my church as well, but don't forget like the classic Christmas carols. Maybe you can't stand those classic Christmas carols and you don't like "Oh Holy Night, Silent Night, Oh Come All Ye Faithful," insert your favorite Christmas carol here. But people who are coming to your worship service on Christmas Eve or Christmas Day, whenever you do your Christmas services, they're expecting to sing those songs. That's what they want, and it's okay to give it to them. Plus, we need to teach our church that those songs are worship songs. So if you want to learn about that, I did a video about that a while back, so I'll link that down in the description below. I give you 5 speaking transitions on how you can teach your church that Christmas songs are worship songs. But let's include these familiar songs and not be afraid to do them. Christmas doesn't have to be like this new and exciting thing every year. I feel like we're always stuck in this constant cycle of trying to one-up the last one. We're like, we can't just sing "Oh Come All Ye Faithful" again and do candle lighting with Silent Night because we did that last year. But that's what people want. They want that sense of community. And yes, there's room for creativity and the room to do things differently, but just include an element of familiarity because that draws people in who aren't comfortable being there. If you get up on stage to lead worship at your Christmas service and you're singing a bunch of songs nobody knows except for the people who come to your church regularly, and they probably aren't that familiar with them either, like, you're not serving the people who are there. So lead in this special context that we have to lead in as worship leaders, where we know, now that I've told you, there are going to be people who are at your Christmas services who don't come to church regularly. So lead with that in mind by including an element of familiarity. The best way you can do that is by incorporating traditional Christmas carols into your Christmas services. Number 3, super practical. Introduce yourself. Once again, I talked about leading in that context where there's going to be people at your church who don't usually come to your church. It's okay to get up there at the beginning, and I know we kind of assume it that on a regular Sunday morning that everybody knows who you are. But first of all, they don't really know who you are on Sunday morning unless you serve in like a church of like 15 or 20 people. But once you get bigger than that, hopefully you have new people coming to your church. Hopefully you have new people coming to your church if you're smaller than that as well. But we need to act like there's new people there every Sunday. So it's okay for me to look out and be like, 89% of these people right now, they know who I am. But for those 3 people out there who don't know who I am, I'm going to say, hey everyone, welcome to, insert your church name here. My name's Spencer. I'm the worship leader here, or I'm a worship leader here, or however you want to say it. That way you create a connection with people. You're not just some random person up there on stage. They know, oh, that's Spencer. Okay, and maybe you talk to him after service. We'll get to that here in a little bit. But yeah, make that connection. Something super simple. Just introduce yourself. You could introduce your team, or as well, if you want to. That might be a little bit excessive, but depending on how big your team is. But you can just say, hey, we're the worship team here at this church. We're thankful that you joined us for Christmas service today. You know, something as simple as that. Just invite people in. Don't assume that this is a normal Sunday morning where most of the people already know you. That's not the case for your Christmas services. So don't be afraid to introduce yourself before you start leading worship. Number 4, invite people back. At the end of your service, there should be an invitation to come back. And I know we this is sort of falls under the challenge and don't condemn thing, because I think in our heads, we say it in our heads, we never say it out loud, but I'm going to say the quiet part out loud, is that we just think, well, these people, they've only come to church on Christmas and Easter for the past 5 years. They aren't coming back. Maybe they've just never been invited. Maybe their tradition and their routine is I go to church on Christmas and Easter, and that's it. But whenever you invite them and say, thanks so much for joining us for our Christmas service, we'd love to see you back on Sunday. And you can make that announcement from the stage. Also, I'm going to talk about here more in a minute, but make it in person as well. And invite people back. Say, and especially, I feel like this past Christmas Eve was on a Sunday or something, or 2 Christmas Eves ago. Might have been weird to do back then, but it's so easy for us now. When is Christmas Eve? Is it a Thursday? Let me check my calendar. Yeah, Christmas Eve is on a Thursday. Maybe you have a Christmas Day service, whatever it is. Either Thursday or Friday, you can say, hey, I want to remind you that we meet on Sundays at 10 a.m. or whenever your service time is. We'd love to see you again. We're going to be celebrating this Christmas story more, or however you want to explain it. Just invite people back. Let them know that they are indeed invited to come back. They don't have to just come once or twice a year. And don't say that, because that's kind of awkward if you're like, we meet here more than just once or twice a year, but just invite them. Just say, come on, you are invited. We'd love to have you back. And finally, number 5, I've talked about a lot of things to do during the service, but building relationships with people happens before and after the service. So before the service, I know Christmas is crazy and you've got a bunch of things to prepare for. Maybe you've got special elements and you got to check in with your tech team and you got to make sure your worship team's on the same page. Do that far in advance, so that an hour before your service, a half an hour, however long you need, you can be out in the lobby or at the front door greeting people as they come in, and you're going to meet a bunch of people who that's their first or second time at your church. And you get to introduce yourself and say, hey, welcome to whatever. My name's Spencer. I'm the worship leader here. Thanks so much for joining us today. I'm glad you're here. Once you make that connection, that's so special for people who come, because then they see you up on stage and you have this little bit of currency with them where you're now not just some random guy or girl up on stage, but you are a person. They said, man, I met that person out in the lobby before the service started. They were kind of nice. They said that they were glad that I was here. I'll listen a little bit more to what they have to say. And you aren't just some figurehead on stage, but you're an actual person. So before the service, get to know people. The best way to do that, stand at the front door, welcome people, go out in the parking lot and direct cars or whatever you do at your church. Get involved in that side of things. I think you should be doing that every Sunday, but specifically on Christmas Eve and your Christmas services. Also, after the service, don't just stand on stage with your band and talk, but actually go out and you can head to the door where people are going to be leaving and say, hey, it was great to have you here. And then you invite them back and say, I'd love to see you again on Sunday sometime, or something like that. These are the perfect ways to build connections that extend beyond a person's thinking that, hey, I come to church once or twice a year, I'm just going to go in, get what I need, and then they won't see me again until next year. Make that personal connection. I challenge you to make that personal connection. So those are 5 ways that you can engage people who only come to church once a year. And this is so important that we lead with that understanding in mind. If you want to really get set up to lead Christmas worship well, I put together a free devotional called 7 Days to Leading Christmas Worship Well. I'll link to it down in the description below. In that devotional, I'll walk you through some of the things that I just talked about, but also a bunch of other things that are going to help you prepare well for Christmas to be able to lead Christmas worship confidently, to get things done before the actual Christmas service day. I know we're always running behind and we procrastinate. I'm going to walk you through how to overcome that, and then also we'll talk a little bit about after Christmas, that it's okay to rest. And I want to give you permission to rest after Christmas. So if you're interested in that, check that out in the description below. Other than that, thanks so much for joining me. Until I see you in the next video, keep leading worship well.